So these notes have been rewritten, but on Friday, we talked about just factoring with product and sum. We talked about factoring with product of AC, which is how I teach it. But then I also reminded you of how to do slip and slide, right? Which was Mrs. Roger and Mr. Weaver's method. And then we also talked about factoring out GCF, okay, of how we work with, always be checking for a GCF. And then our last example we squeezed in was difference of squares, okay? So those were kind of all the different factoring pieces we talked about. We've got 2 more factoring examples, and then we're going to work on solving some equations, which, hey, guess what? Solving the equations, again, we're going to have to be able to factor. So we're going to get lots and lots of factoring practice. So if this isn't your strong point, you get practice, okay? If you just need some refreshers, you get practice. But I want you guys following along and trying to, always try to stay a step ahead of me on that factor. If you can stay a step ahead of me or know where I'm going next, then you're headed down the right, path to remembering all this. So, okay. So with this in mind, 3x squared minus 7x plus 2. What's the first question I suggested?
GCF.
Is there a GCF? Always check, because sometimes it'll be very helpful. Like if there's a GCF right here of 3, that would be wonderful because I could get rid of that a value, but there's no GCF. So, next plan. How do we factor this?
Do that thing we did on the second problem.
Do that thing we did on the second problem. Yes. Okay. And I'm either going to say product of AC or slip and slide. Those are the options I'm giving. Okay. Do we have a preference of what I do first? I might end up doing both, but do we have a preference of what I do here?
Product of AC.
Yeah.
I heard both there, didn't I? Okay. How about, and I want to do both, because I think we're at that point where if you're trying to figure it out and remember it, you need to see what, you need to see your problem. So I think we're going to do both. Should I try slip and slide first this time? Yeah. Now, if you're thinking, nope, I want product of AC, then just hang on, okay? So, slip and slide. What do you guys remember if we're going to slip and slide first?
You take this way down.
Okay. So if we're going to slip and slide, we're going to start by moving that A value over to the C value, right? We're going to start by slipping that 3 over. And so when we do this, it's going to become x squared minus 7x plus what? 6. Because 2 times 3 is 6, correct? And now what? How do we factor this? Since it's just a 1x squared, we can go ahead and break it into 2 parentheses, yes? What does x squared break into? X squared breaks into x times x every time. And then how do I fill those other numbers? What are we going to need?
Plus or minus.
Wait. Correct or both? I think they're both going to be minus.
I agree they're both going to be minus. Because we're going to need numbers that what? Multiply to be 6 and add to be -7. And so what multiplies to be 6 and adds to be -7? 6 and 1. How do you multiply to be a positive, but yet add to be a negative? They both need to be negatives. Okay? And I think, is that something that maybe Mrs. Rogers, she teaches you to fill your signs in and then do your numbers? And I kind of do the reverse of that. Okay? So, but since we do multiply to be a positive and add to be a negative, they are both automatically negatives. 6 and 1. Or if you want to argue 1 and 6, right? Okay. Am I done?
No.
No. Now what?
You have to put the 3 on
Yeah. This 3 that we multiplied over now has to divide out. Right? So with that in mind, what happens on the first parenthesis? 6 divided by 3 is 2. So it's x minus 2. What happens on the second parenthesis? Yeah. This 1 does not divide by 3, so this 3 needs to go back out front and become 3x minus 1. Okay. That's slip and slide, for those of you that wanted that, right? Now, I do want to remind us of productive AC as well. Eventually, I won't do every problem 2 ways, but we're in the beginning, right? I want you to find your path. So, this was slip and slide. Let's try a product of AC over here. And the problem, let me rewrite the problem. 3x squared minus 7x plus 2. Okay. This time, you don't move the 3, product of AC. What are A and C? 3 and 2, yes? So 3 times 2, which is 6. So that's what I mean when I say product of AC. And what sum do I need? Sum of the middle term. So sum of negative 7. What adds to be 6? Excuse me. Rewind. What multiplies to be 6 and adds to be negative 7? Didn't we already do that?
Yeah.
So you guys were all with me on that last piece. So we're just going to use negative 6 and negative 1. Now, product of AC. What do I do with the negative 6 and negative 1? This is the different part. We don't go to the parentheses. We take that negative 6 and negative 1 and we split the middle term, right? So negative 7x. And you could go either way with this. It doesn't matter which number you put first. So we could say minus 6x minus 1x or minus 1x minus 6x. Does it matter which way I go to you guys? I'm going to say minus 6x minus 1x. I don't know if you guys have enough knowledge of this yet to be able to kind of look ahead and decide what you want. As you get practice, you will. Now, what else am I going to say? Don't forget, carry down the 3x squared and the plus 2. Okay, I've got 4 terms. We're going to take those 4 terms and split them in half. Officially, did I mention this on Friday? This is called factoring by grouping, which is something you learned in Algebra 1. Okay, this is factoring by grouping. What's GCF of the first 2 terms? So 3x squared minus 6x, they can both divide by 3 and x, yes? So I'm going to divide them both by 3x. Now, if you want that visual, there's your visual if we're dividing by 3x. But most importantly, we want to take that 3x and put it out front. What is 3x squared divided by 3x? Just x, right? Because 3 divided by 3 cancels, just x. Minus, what's 6x divided by 3x? 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. X is canceled. Now, second set of parentheses, or second 2 terms. Minus 1x plus 2. What do minus 1x and plus 2 both divide by? 1. Okay. GCF-wise, technically it's a 1. And what I'm going to say, anytime this first number is negative, make it a negative 1. Okay? And if you look ahead, we're trying to get these parentheses to match, right? So we're going to use negative 1. Now, don't forget, write down the negative 1 here. Okay? And then negative 1x divided by negative 1 is positive x. 2 divided by negative 1, minus 2. Now, good news, I'm happy with this because parentheses match, yes? How do I write my answer? The GCFs of 3x minus 1 and the matching parenthesis of x minus 2. Okay? Remember, it doesn't matter which order you put your parentheses as long as you have the same two parentheses. Okay? You've seen both methods twice now. I'd probably pick a method that you want to focus on and you do that method. Hopefully you're finding a method you want to pick on or you want to focus on, okay? But they're both always there for you. And I'm more than willing to help with either. Okay. One more, just factoring. 2x squared plus 4x minus 126. GCF 2? I know 2 and 4 divided by 2. I know 126 divides by 2 because 126 is even, right? There's my clue. I know it divides by 2. I just don't know what the result is necessarily, but okay. If it divides by 2, I'm going to put a 2 out front. I'm going to divide each term by 2. 2x squared divided by 2. X squared. And again, you don't have to show the divide by 2, but if you need it. 4x divided by 2. 2 what? 2x minus 126 divided by 2.
63.
I had 63 on my brain. Okay. I went with 2 into 12 goes 6 times, and 2 into 6 goes 3 times. And again, you guys can always use a calculator, but that's good mental math practice too. Okay, are we done? Not necessarily, right? We factored out GCF is good. Good news is it just became a x squared now, but does it go farther? Probably better check, yes? So we probably better check our product and sum. A product of what? Your C term, your number at the end, negative 63. And a sum of the middle term 2. Okay. What numbers multiply to be 63? Okay. I agree, 9 and 7. If you've got that, you're good, right? If not, you're working up your way up. 1 goes with 63. Does 2 go into 63? No. Does 3?
I think so.
Yeah. 3 and 21, it looks like. Does 4 go into 63? No. If 2 doesn't go into 63, we get to skip all even numbers, okay? So 4 doesn't. Does 5? No, it doesn't end in 5 or 0. Does 6? No, it's even. Does 7? Yeah. 7 times 9. Does 8? No, it's even. Does 9? It's already listed, so we're done. Okay. With that in mind, which pair works? 7 and 9. And I know this is where, again, if you were with Mrs. Rogers, she would, what, all right, how'd you do the signs maybe? Okay. How do we multiply to be a negative? Okay, you have to have one of each, yes? A positive and a negative. If it adds to be a positive 2, what do we know? Larger number is positive. Smaller number is negative. Okay. Now, what about this 2 out front? carry it down, yes? I didn't write it out earlier like I should have, but this is going to break up into 2 parentheses. X squared is x and x. We said we're multiplying, and we have -7, +9. Okay, guys. We're not going to go far from factoring. We're going to be factoring on the next page, okay? Before we get there, though, we need to look at this connection here and make this connection, okay? Our whole lesson is about solving quadratics, and specifically, we've been looking at some graphs of quadratics. So this graph right here shows the function y equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. And then the question is, how do the zeros of the function relate to the factors of the expression x squared plus 2x minus 8? So we are trying to relate the zeros and the factors. Okay? So let's start with factors. Okay? If you have the expression x squared plus 2x minus 8, can we factor? This one should be easy compared to some we just did, shouldn't it? Is there a GCF? No. How do we factor this? Two parentheses, right? X squared breaks into x and x. We're multiplying to be -8 and adding to be 2. And I heard something about 4 and 2. Specifically, what about my signs? Yeah. If it multiplies to be -8, I need opposite signs. I need a positive and a negative. If it adds to be positive, bigger number positive. So right there, x plus 4 and x minus 2 are my factors. Okay? Now, they asked us about zeros. What are zeros another name for?
No solution.
No. Zeros are another name for x-intercepts. Okay? Zeros are another name for x-intercepts. What are my x-intercepts on this graph?
4, -4.
My x-intercepts are -4 and 2, right? Or the ordered pairs, -4, 0, and 2, 0, yes? So those are my zeros. Okay? So first and foremost, remember that zeros is another name for x-intercepts. Okay? If we're asked for the zero of the graph, you're asked for where is it crossing the x-axis. Okay? This could also be stated as x equals -4 and x equals 2. With that in mind, let's see, how do I want to put this together? What connection do you see here? What? Switch is in, it's the same number, but the signs are opposite, yes? Okay. Now, what we're going to talk about is in order to find your zeros, you're going to be setting each factor equal to 0. Okay? Because if we set each factor equal to 0, so if we set x plus 4 equal to 0, then when we solve that, we're going to get x equals negative 4. If we set x minus 2 equal to 0, we solve that, we're going to get x equals 2. Okay? So, what I'm going to tell you, whoops, let me get a color I know you can see for sure. A 0, zeros, any value that makes y equal 0. So that's why it's also your x-intercepts. Okay? So any value that makes y equals 0, also known as your x-intercepts. Sorry, I was trying to decide how much I wanted to write out there. Okay, so remember that vocab word zeros. That's one that will pop up on things. Like that would have popped up on iLearn very possibly. It could pop up on something like SAT, PSAT. Okay. These are the zeros is a good vocab word. But you know how to find the zeros because it's just factoring and setting the factors is going to be setting the factors equal to 0. Okay. So turn the page when you're ready. And on this next page, notice we're going to talk about something called the zero product property. You did this in Algebra 1, okay? The zero product property states that if a product of real number factors is 0, then at least one of the factors must be 0. In the case of two factors, if a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. So a times b equals 0, keep in mind, when you multiply, how do you get an answer of 0? Because one of the items was 0, right? So the idea is that either one of those is 0, either A or B. So we're going to use this idea to solve by factoring. Your job is going to be to factor the equation and set both factors equal to 0. So we're going to do the same type thing we were doing in the beginning of the lesson, except then we just factored and we stopped, right? Here, because it's asking us to solve, we keep going. I want to know, what does x equal? Okay? So, another thing is, if it says solve the equations by factoring, what do we need to start off making sure our equation is equal to? Yeah. In order to factor these equations, your equation to start has to be equal to 0. If your equation isn't equal to 0, you can't start. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at how this one's different. So x squared plus x equals 42. Our job is to solve in the end. But to get there, we're going to factor. Before we can factor, what do I need to do? Okay, to make this equation equal to 0, we're going to move the positive 42, so we're going to subtract 42. So, rewrite this. I have x squared plus x, and then what? Minus 42 equals 0. Okay. It's all about factoring this unit or this lesson. How do I factor that? can start by asking ourselves, is there a GCF? Is there a GCF? No, so how do we want to set this up? Is this looking like it'll factor into 2 parentheses? Yeah. What we just did, right? What's x squared break up into? 2 x's. Could you go ahead and fill in the signs if you wanted to? You could. Uh-huh. I agree with plus and minus. We're going to need a product of what? More specifically, though, negative 42. And a sum of, what's the invisible number in front of x? And it is a 1. Okay. Now, is your brain there? Does it know that pair of numbers?
Yeah.
If so, awesome. If not, make a list, right? That's what I'm always going to say, is make a list if you're not sure. I know 42 starts with 1 and 42. Does 42 divide by 2? Yeah, 2 and 21. Does it divide by 3? It actually does. It's 3 and 14, I think. Does it divide by 4? No. Does it divide by 5? No, because it doesn't end in 0. 5, 6? 6 and 7. And that makes that my last pair, doesn't it? Because then 7. Okay. So are 6 and 7 my answers to this problem?
Sort of, not really. Negative.
I'm going to go with no. Oh, I see. You're talking about, okay. So yeah, what signs did we need? We needed it to be negative 6 plus 7. And that's because they multiply to be a negative, so positive and negative. Since they add to be a positive, bigger number first. Am I done? Are those my answers? Are those my answers? Sorry.
Yes.
Not yet. Those are my factors. This is an equation. All I've done is factor. For me to be done, I need x equals something, okay?
So you're going to say like the x minus 6 equals 0?
Yes. This is the zero factor property. We have 2 factors multiplying to equal 0, right? X minus 6 equals 0, x plus 7 equals 0. This means that one or the other must always equal 0. So we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to set x minus 6 equal to 0. And I'm going to set x plus 7 equals 0. The factoring is the hard part, right? The solving's easy. It's just you got to get a factor. If it's x minus 6, what do we do? Add 6, and so one answer is x equals 6. If it's x plus 7, what do I do? Subtract 7, and then the other answer is negative 7. Folks, I have 2 answers. X equals 6, and x equals negative 7. Start looking at the next one. See if you can figure it out. Hello. Okay. Thank you. Bye. I'm just delivering the message. Okay, guys. Did you get step 1 done?
No.
What's step 1 have to be? Before we can factor, what has to be true?
No GCS.
Hold that GCF thought, even before GCFs. Make your equation equal to 0. Is my equation equal to 0 right now?
No.
No, it's not. Now, I personally am a fan of having a positive x squared term. Makes life easier, in my opinion. Okay? So if I'm a fan of having a positive x squared term, there's two ways we can go about this. One way is, can we leave the 2x squared where it is and move over the 9x and 5?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one option. The other option is, can you move the 2x squared to the right? You can, it's going to be negative, and then you could multiply everything by a negative. Okay? Now, my way, how do you move a negative 9x? You add 9x. How do you move a plus 5? You subtract 5. So I'm going to add 9x over and subtract 5. And that gives me the equation 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 0. Okay. Now I'll go back to Eliazin's question when he said, is there a GCF? Now I'm willing to talk GCF. Is there GCF? I wish there was, but there's not. Since there's no GCF, what are my options for a method here? Slip and slide or product of AC? Do I still have some fans of both? I know I have a fan of slip and slide over here. Do I have fans of product of AC also, or no? Or we're just not sure right now?
I'm not sure.
Still not sure? Okay. So, which do you guys want me to do first? Slip and slide? Okay, I'll slip and slide first. If we're going to slip and slide, what are we going to do? Yeah, we're going to take the 2 over. Okay, so if I take the 2 over, this now becomes what? X squared plus 9x minus 10 equals 0. Now what? Are we set to go into 2 parentheses? Yeah. And notice I'm keep carrying down that equals 0 so I don't forget in the end to solve. X squared breaks into x and x. What do I need a product and sum of?
10, -10, 9.
Okay, good. A product multiplying to be -10 and a sum adding to be 9. Okay, yeah. My options here are 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. 1 and 10 works with, which way did you say it? -1, +10? Because -1 times +10 is a negative. -1 plus 10 is a +9. So make one parenthesis x minus 1. Make the other parenthesis x plus 10. Now we are slip and sliding, so what do we do? We got to divide it by the 2. Okay. X minus 1 over 2. What do we know about the 1 over 2? 2x minus 1. And I assume this is how she had you do this for an equation. What do we know about 10 over 2? X plus 5. Okay. What do we do with our factors? Set them each equal to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. And I am running out of space. Yikes. With this in mind, what about this 2x minus 1? You add 1. So 2x equals 1, and then what? Divide by 2, and x is 1/2. Sorry, really squeezing that in out there, aren't I? Hopefully on your paper it works better, right? I can fit it in better with pencil, although there's a lot here too. What about the other one? Subtract 5, x equals -5. Okay, so we have two answers again, right? Okay, you should always be having two answers. Now, what's my other option here?
The P equals AC.
Product of AC. And I'm not, it's your call. We were at the problem of what? I'm going to use we had 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 0, right? I'm going to use that one right there. Product of AC means I need a product of what? Product of 2 times -5. And what is 2 times -5? -10. And we need a sum of 9. Didn't we already do this? We already did this, yes? So -1 and 10. Okay. Split this. -1x plus 10x. That'll work, I guess. Don't forget, carry your first term down. 2x squared, carry your last term down, minus 5. And then my equation still equals 0. Okay, how many terms do I have here? I have 4 terms. So we're going to split it in half so we can factor by grouping. What's GCF of the first two?
1x.
They both divide by nx. So, write that x out front. 2x squared divided by x. 2x minus 1x divided by x. 1. GCF of the second half. What do 10x and minus 5 both divide by? 5. This time we're dividing by a positive 5. 10x divided by 5 is 2x. Minus 5 divided by 5 is 1. Don't forget it still equals 0. This is good factoring, yes. This 2x minus 1's match. Okay, what's one parenthesis?
X plus 5.
Your GCFs of x plus 5. Good. What's the other parenthesis?
2x.
The matching from 2x minus 1. Okay, whoops, not what I meant to do there. What do we know? Two factors multiplying to equals 0 means set each factor equal to 0, right? X plus 5 equals 0 and 2x minus 1 equals 0. This one, x equals -5. This one, it's 2x minus 1, 2x equals 1, and x equals 1/2. Okay, guys, we will work on getting notes finished tomorrow.